The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood quietly by the large window in her private study. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived just hours earlier. The royal seal at the bottom seemed to mock her as she read the words again, hoping somehow they might change. William was being deployed overseas on a humanitarian mission that would take him away from England for 6 months. 6 long months without seeing his face, without hearing his laugh echo through their home, without feeling his reassuring presence beside her during the countless royal duties they shared. The decision had come from the highest levels of government. A crisis in a distant nation required immediate attention, and William's military background and diplomatic skills made him the perfect candidate to lead the relief efforts. It was an honor, everyone said, a testament to his capabilities and the trust the nation placed in him. But for Catherine, it felt like the world was crumbling around her. They'd been married for over a decade, and never once had they been separated for more than a few weeks. Their partnership wasn't just personal, it was professional, emotional, and deeply rooted in their shared commitment to their royal duties and their family. She thought about their 3 children sleeping peacefully upstairs. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no idea that their father would soon be thousands of miles away. How could she explain to them that Daddy had to leave for such a long time? How could she make them understand that this sacrifice was for the greater good when she herself was struggling to accept it? The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her quickly wipe away the tears that had begun to form. William appeared in the doorway, his own face etched with the same mixture of duty and heartbreak that she felt. He had already been briefed about the mission, already begun the mental preparation that his military training had taught him. "Kate," he said softly, crossing the room to stand beside her. His voice carried the weight of everything they both understood but couldn't quite say aloud. She turned to face him, seeing her own pain reflected in his blue eyes. "When do you leave?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. 3 days, he replied, reaching out to take her hands in his. 3 days to prepare to say goodbye, to make arrangements for everything here. 3 days felt like both an eternity and no time at all. Catherine knew that every moment from now until his departure would be precious, each conversation meaningful, every glance something to treasure and remember during the long months ahead. The palace would continue to function without him, of course. The staff was well trained, the schedules could be adjusted, and Catherine was more than capable of handling increased responsibilities. But the personal cost felt overwhelming. That evening, as they sat together in their private living room after putting the children to bed, the weight of the situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and for a moment they could almost pretend this was just another quiet evening at home. "I keep thinking about all the little things," Catherine said, curling up next to William on the sofa. "Your terrible morning hair, the way you always steal the last biscuit from the jar, how you never remember to put your coffee cup in the dishwasher." William smiled despite the circumstances. "And I'll miss how you always reorganize my desk when you think I'm not looking, the way you hum while you're working, and how you always know exactly what to say to make everything better." They talked through the night, sharing memories, making plans for staying in touch, and trying to memorize every detail of being together. The palace staff moved quietly around them, respecting their need for privacy, while making discreet preparations for the upcoming departure. As dawn broke over London, they both knew that these precious hours together were already slipping away too quickly. The next morning brought a flurry of activity that neither William nor Catherine had anticipated. Word of the prince's deployment had somehow reached the media, and by breakfast time, news vans were already gathering outside the palace gates. The story was spreading across social media faster than wildfire, with hashtags like "I Stay Strong Kate" and "Royal Sacrifice" trending worldwide. Catherine watched the news coverage from her office, feeling overwhelmed by the public's reaction. People were sharing their own stories of military deployments and long-distance separations, offering support and understanding in ways she hadn't expected. Letters and flowers began arriving at the palace in unprecedented numbers, all addressed to her with messages of encouragement and solidarity. Meanwhile, William was deep in briefings with government officials and military advisors. The mission he was undertaking was complex and dangerous, involving the coordination of international relief efforts in a region torn apart by natural disasters and political instability. His role would be to serve as a liaison between various humanitarian organizations and local governments, using his diplomatic status to navigate complicated political situations. The children sensed something was different. Even though their parents tried to maintain normal routines, Charlotte, always perceptive, noticed that her mother seemed sadder than usual, and that there were more serious conversations happening behind closed doors. George, being older, picked up on the increased security presence and the unusual number of official-looking visitors. During lunch, William made the decision that had been weighing on his mind since receiving the deployment orders. He called the children into the family room and sat them down for a conversation that would change their understanding of what it meant to be part of the royal family. "I have something important to tell you all," he began, looking at each of his children in turn. "In 2 days, I'm going to travel to a place very far away to help people who need our assistance." Louis, being the youngest, simply nodded as if his father had announced they were going to the grocery store. But George and Charlotte immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, while George straightened his shoulders in a gesture that reminded Catherine painfully of William. "How long will you be gone, Papa?" Charlotte asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. William replied honestly. He had always believed in treating his children with respect and honesty, even when the truth was difficult. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Catherine reached over to take Charlotte's hand while George moved closer to his father. "Will you be safe?" George asked, displaying maturity beyond his years. "I will do everything I can to stay safe," William promised, "and I will call you every day that I'm able to. We'll read bedtime stories over video calls, and I'll want to hear about everything you're doing at school." That afternoon, the family did something they rarely had the luxury of doing. They spent hours together without any official duties or scheduled appointments. They played games in the garden, had an impromptu picnic on the palace grounds, and took countless photos together. Catherine found herself studying William's face through the camera lens, trying to capture every expression and angle that she would need to remember during the months ahead. The palace staff, many of whom had worked for the family for years, were visibly emotional as they went about their duties. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, who had been with them since their wedding, was seen wiping away tears as she organized William's travel arrangements. Even the usually stoic security team seemed affected by the upcoming departure. As evening approached, Catherine made a decision that surprised even herself. She asked the palace communications team to arrange for her to make a brief public statement. She had never spoken publicly about personal matters before, but something about the outpouring of public support made her feel that people deserved to hear from her directly. Standing in the palace's formal drawing room, with cameras rolling and the weight of the nation's attention upon her, Catherine spoke from her heart. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her well could detect the emotion she was carefully controlling. She thanked the public for their support and understanding, acknowledging that while her situation was unique in some ways, the pain of separation was something many families understood. She spoke about the importance of the mission William was undertaking, and her pride in his dedication to service, even as she admitted that saying goodbye would be one of the hardest things she had ever done. The response to her statement was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with messages of support, and the palace reported that they had received more letters and calls in a single day than they typically received in a month. People from all walks of life were sharing their own stories of courage and separation, creating an unexpected sense of community around their shared experience of love and loss. The final day before William's departure dawned gray and drizzly, as if the London weather itself was reflecting the somber mood that had settled over Kensington Palace. Catherine woke early, having barely slept, and found William already awake beside her, staring at the ceiling with the same troubled expression she had seen on his face for the past 3 days. They had agreed to spend this last day as a completely private family, with no official duties, no meetings, and no interruptions from the outside world. The palace staff had been given instructions to handle all communications and to protect the family's privacy at all costs. After a quiet breakfast, they decided to visit all of William's favorite places around the palace grounds. They walked through the gardens where he had proposed to Catherine all those years ago, past the tree where they had carved their initials during their engagement, and to the small pond where they often brought the children to feed the ducks. Each location held memories that seemed more precious now that they were about to be separated. Catherine found herself taking mental photographs of everything. The way William's hair caught the light filtering through the trees, how he automatically reached for her hand as they walked, the sound of his laughter when Louis chased a particularly bold duck. The children seemed to sense that this was a special day, and they were more affectionate than usual, constantly reaching for their parents' hands or asking to be picked up and carried. Charlotte had been carrying around a small notebook all morning, secretly writing letters and drawing pictures that she planned to give her father before he left. In the afternoon, William spent individual time with each child. He read George's favorite adventure book with him, painted watercolors with Charlotte, and played building blocks with Louis. Catherine watched from the doorway, memorizing these tender moments between father and children, knowing that they would need these memories to sustain them during the difficult months ahead. As evening approached, the reality of the next morning's departure became impossible to ignore. William's bags were packed and waiting by the door. His official documents were in order, and the car that would take him to the airport was scheduled to arrive at dawn. They ordered Chinese takeaway for dinner, something they rarely did, and ate it sitting on the floor of their private living room while watching the children's favorite movie. It felt simultaneously normal and surreal, this ordinary family evening that was actually their last for half a year. After the children were in bed, William and Catherine sat together in their bedroom, talking about practical matters and trying to avoid the emotional reality of what was coming. They discussed schedules for video calls, time zone differences, and how to handle the children's questions and possible difficulties. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself," William said, taking her hands in his. "I know you'll be taking care of everyone else. The children, your royal duties, the charities. But promise me you'll remember to take care of Catherine too." "Only if you promise to come back to us exactly as you are now," she replied, looking directly into his eyes. "No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Just do your job and come home." They made lists of things they wanted to remember to tell each other, wrote letters to be opened at specific times during the separation, and recorded video messages for the children to watch when they missed their father too much. As the night wore on, they found themselves talking about their future together, making plans for when William returned. They would take a proper family holiday, they decided, somewhere far from royal duties and public attention. They would have lazy mornings in bed, family game nights, and all the simple pleasures that their royal status usually made difficult. The palace around them was quieter than usual, as if even the building itself was holding its breath for the morning's goodbye. Staff members had left small tokens of support. Mrs. Henderson had placed William's favorite biscuits in his travel bag. The head gardener had cut fresh flowers for Catherine's desk, and even the normally invisible security team had left a handwritten note wishing William a safe journey. As they finally prepared for bed, both William and Catherine knew that sleep would be elusive. They lay awake holding each other, listening to each other's breathing and trying to freeze this moment in time. Outside their window, London slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow would bring one of the most emotional royal farewells in recent memory. The last thing Catherine remembered before finally drifting off to sleep was the feeling of William's wedding ring against her back as he held her close, a small but profound reminder of the promises they had made to each other that would now be tested by distance and time. The alarm clock's sharp tone cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 5:30 a.m., though neither William nor Catherine had been truly asleep. They had dozed fitfully, waking frequently to check the time and steal a few more moments of closeness before the inevitable separation. Catherine felt as if she was moving through a dream as she helped William with his final preparations. His uniform was pressed and waiting, his travel documents organized in a leather portfolio, and his personal items carefully packed in a small bag that would accompany him on the journey. The children had begged to wake up early to say goodbye, despite their parents' initial reluctance to disrupt their sleep schedules. At 6 a.m., 3 small figures appeared in the hallway, still in their pajamas but wide awake with the solemnity of the occasion. George approached his father with the formal handshake they had been practicing, but the composure lasted only a moment before he threw his arms around William's waist. Charlotte presented her notebook of letters and drawings, explaining that there was one for each week he would be away, and that he should only open one at a time. Louis, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing the emotional weight of the moment, clung to his father's leg and refused to let go. The family made their way to the private courtyard where the official car was waiting. Catherine was struck by how ordinary the black sedan looked, as if something so momentous should require more dramatic transportation. The driver, a man William had worked with many times before, stood respectfully aside while the family said their final goodbyes. William knelt down to his children's level one last time. "Remember," he told them, "I'm not really going away. I'm carrying each of you right here." He pointed to his heart, "and nothing can ever change that. When you look at the stars at night, remember that I'm looking at the same stars and thinking of you." Charlotte nodded seriously, while George blinked rapidly to hold back tears. Louis simply pressed his small hand against his father's chest, as if trying to feel the love William had promised was there. Then it was Catherine's turn. Standing in the courtyard where they had taken their first official photographs as a married couple, where they had celebrated birthdays and holidays and countless ordinary moments that now seemed extraordinary, they faced each other knowing that this goodbye would have to sustain them for months. "I love you," William said simply, the words carrying the weight of everything they couldn't say in front of the children and the waiting driver. "Come home to us," Catherine replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. Their kiss was gentle and brief, but it held within it all the love, hope, and fear they both felt. When they separated, William picked up his bag and walked toward the car without looking back, knowing that seeing their faces again would make leaving impossible. As the car disappeared through the palace gates, Catherine stood with her children in the gray morning light, feeling as if a part of herself had been torn away. The courtyard seemed impossibly empty, and the silence was broken only by the distant sounds of London waking up to a new day. Mrs. Henderson appeared quietly at Catherine's elbow, offering a cup of tea and a gentle reminder that breakfast was ready for the children. The normal routines of palace life were already reasserting themselves, providing structure and purpose when everything else felt uncertain. Throughout the morning, messages of support continued to pour in from around the world. Other royal families, heads of state, and ordinary citizens all expressed their admiration for the sacrifice the family was making. The media coverage was respectful but extensive, with news outlets praising both William's commitment to humanitarian service and Catherine's grace under pressure. By noon, Catherine had received confirmation that William's flight had departed safely and was en route to its first stop. The next communication would come in 12 hours when he reached his destination, and even that felt like an eternity. The children handled the day better than she had expected. George threw himself into his schoolwork with unusual intensity, while Charlotte spent hours organizing her art supplies and planning projects to share with her father during their video calls. Louis, perhaps too young to fully grasp the situation, seemed mostly confused about why everyone was so sad. That evening, as Catherine tucked the children into bed, Charlotte asked the question she had been dreading. "Mummy, what if something happens to Papa while he's away?" Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Your Papa is very brave and very smart, and there are people whose job it is to keep him safe. But you're right that sometimes we can't control everything that happens in the world. What we can control is how much we love each other and how we take care of each other while he's away." As she turned off the lights in the children's rooms and made her way to her own bedroom, Catherine felt the full weight of her new reality. The bed seemed enormous and empty, the silence oppressive after years of sharing evening conversations and quiet laughter with William. She picked up her phone to check for messages, knowing it was too early to hear from him but unable to stop herself from hoping. Instead, she found hundreds of messages from friends, family members, and even strangers offering support and encouragement. For the first time since receiving the deployment letter, Catherine allowed herself to cry freely, grieving not just for the months of separation ahead, but for the innocence they had lost about their ability to control their destiny together. The first phone call came at 2:30 a.m. London time, jolting Catherine from the light sleep she had finally managed to achieve. William's voice crackled through the international connection, tired but reassuring, confirming that he had arrived safely at his destination and was settling into his temporary quarters. "The time difference is going to be our biggest challenge," he said, and Catherine could hear the exhaustion in his voice. but I promise we'll make this work. How are the children? Catherine filled him in on their day, sharing Charlotte's artistic projects and George's determination to learn everything he could about the region where his father was working. She didn't mention her own struggles with sleep or the way the palace felt like a museum, without his presence bringing it to life. Over the following weeks, they developed a routine of communication that worked around William's unpredictable schedule and the children's school and bedtime routines. Video calls became precious appointments that the whole family planned their days around. The children would dress up for their calls with Papa, and Catherine would make sure his favorite corner of their living room looked perfect in the camera frame. But the calls also highlighted the growing distance between them. William's face grew thinner and more weathered as the weeks passed, his eyes reflecting the difficult situations he was witnessing and trying to help resolve. Sometimes the connection would cut out in the middle of a conversation, leaving them staring at blank screens and wondering when they would next hear his voice. Catherine found herself taking on responsibilities she had never imagined. The palace staff looked to her for decisions that William would normally make, and she discovered reserves of strength and leadership she hadn't known she possessed. She attended official functions alone, gave speeches that she had never planned to give, and became the sole royal presence at events they had always handled together. The public's fascination with her situation never seemed to wane. Every appearance she made was analyzed for signs of how she was coping with the separation. Fashion magazines praised her composure and strength, while tabloids speculated about the strain on their marriage. Catherine learned to ignore both the praise and the speculation, focusing instead on the genuine support she received from people who understood the sacrifice military families made every day. One particularly difficult evening, 3 months into William's deployment, Charlotte had a complete breakdown at bedtime. She had been strong for so long, helping her younger brothers and putting on a brave face for the cameras, but the constant missing of her father finally overwhelmed her 8-year-old emotional reserves. "I want Papa to come home now," she sobbed into Catherine's shoulder. "I'm tired of missing him. I'm tired of pretending it's okay." Catherine held her daughter close, feeling her own carefully maintained composure cracking. "I'm tired of it too, sweetheart," she admitted. "It's okay to be sad and angry about this. We don't have to pretend it's easy." They cried together on Charlotte's bed, and for the first time since William's departure, Catherine allowed herself to acknowledge how much she was struggling. The constant strength she projected for the children, the staff and the public was exhausting, and she realized she needed to find ways to be honest about her own feelings without burdening her children. The next morning, she made a decision that surprised her advisors. She asked the palace communications team to arrange for her to visit a military family support center, not as an official royal visit, but as someone seeking connection with others who understood her experience. The visit was transformational. Sitting in a circle with spouses and children of deployed military personnel, Catherine found herself able to speak honestly about her fears, her loneliness, and her struggles with maintaining routines and discipline as a single parent. For the first time in months, she felt understood rather than admired. Sarah, whose husband was serving his 3rd deployment in 5 years, offered practical advice about managing time zone differences and keeping children connected to their absent parent. Maria, a mother of 4 whose husband had been deployed for 8 months, shared strategies for handling bedtime meltdowns and maintaining discipline when exhaustion set in. Most importantly, Catherine realized that her experience, while unique in its public nature, was fundamentally the same as millions of other families around the world. The pain of separation, the pride in a loved one's service, and the daily challenge of holding everything together were universal experiences that transcended royal titles and palace walls. When she returned to Kensington Palace that afternoon, something had shifted in her perspective. She still missed William desperately, still counted the days until his return, but she no longer felt quite so alone in her struggle. She had found a community of people who understood exactly what she was going through, and their strength gave her the courage to continue. That evening's video call with William was different too. Instead of trying to convince him that everything was fine, Catherine shared her difficult day with Charlotte and her visit to the support center. William's relief at hearing her speak honestly about her struggles was visible even through the pixelated video connection. "You don't have to be perfect, Kate," he said softly. "You just have to be you. That's all any of us can do." As William's deployment entered its 5th month, An unexpected crisis arose that would test the strength of their relationship in ways they had never imagined. Communication from William's location suddenly stopped completely for 10 days, with no explanation from the military officials who had been coordinating their regular contact. Catherine first noticed something was wrong when their scheduled Sunday video call didn't happen. William was usually punctual about their family calls, understanding how important they were for the children's emotional well-being. When Monday passed without any word, she began to feel the first stirrings of real panic. The palace's security team was in contact with government officials, but the information they received was frustratingly vague. There had been some kind of incident in the region where William was working, they were told. But his safety could not be confirmed due to communication blackouts in the area. Catherine faced an agonizing decision about what to tell the children. George and Charlotte had already noticed that their father hadn't called, and Louis kept asking when they would talk to Papa again. She chose to be honest within age-appropriate limits, explaining that there were some problems with phone lines where their father was working, but avoiding any mention of danger or her own growing fears. The media, always quick to pick up on any unusual activity around the royal family, began speculating about William's silence. Stories ranged from equipment failures to serious security threats, and Catherine found herself avoiding news coverage entirely to prevent her imagination from running wild with worst-case scenarios. On the 6th day of silence, Catherine made a decision that shocked her advisors. She requested a private meeting with the Prime Minister, demanding more information about her husband's situation and threatening to go public with her concerns if she didn't receive honest answers. The meeting took place in a secure room at Downing Street, away from press attention and palace protocol. The Prime Minister, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, explained that William's team had been evacuated from their original location due to increased violence in the region, but that communication had been lost during the evacuation process. "We have every reason to believe he is safe," the Prime Minister assured her, "but the political situation is extremely volatile, and we cannot risk compromising ongoing rescue efforts by revealing details about his location." Catherine left the meeting feeling both relieved and frustrated. The knowledge that efforts were being made to locate William was comforting, but the continued uncertainty was almost unbearable. She returned to the palace determined to maintain normal routines for the children, while privately preparing for any outcome. The support she received during those 10 days was overwhelming. Letters and flowers arrived at the palace in unprecedented numbers, with people sharing their own stories of waiting for news of loved ones in dangerous situations. Military families reached out to offer practical advice about coping with communication blackouts, while complete strangers sent messages of hope and encouragement. On the 10th day, Catherine was in the middle of helping Louis with a puzzle when her private phone rang. William's name appeared on the screen and she felt her knees nearly give out with relief. "Kate?" His voice was hoarse and tired, but unmistakably him. "Oh God, William, where have you been? Are you hurt? Are you safe?" The questions tumbled out of her before she could stop them. "I'm safe now," he assured her quickly. "I can't tell you much about what happened, but I'm in a secure location and I'm not injured." "How are the children? How are you?" Catherine sank into a chair, suddenly aware that she had been holding her breath for 10 days. "We've been so worried. The children have been asking about you constantly, and I didn't know what to tell them." They talked for nearly an hour, with William doing his best to reassure her without revealing details about the situation that had led to his silence. Catherine could hear in his voice that the experience had changed him, that he had seen things and faced dangers that he would probably never be able to fully share with her. When the children learned that their father was safe and able to talk to them again, their relief was evident in their animated chatter and excited questions about his adventures. But Catherine noticed that they held on to her more tightly that evening, as if the 10 days of uncertainty had reminded them how fragile their sense of security really was. The incident marked a turning point in how Catherine approached the remaining weeks of William's deployment. She stopped trying to maintain the illusion that everything was normal, and instead focused on helping her family develop resilience in the face of uncertainty. She began involving the children in planning for William's return, letting them help choose decorations for a welcome home celebration, and encouraging them to work on special projects to show him when he got back. The anticipation of his homecoming became a positive focus that helped distract from the daily reality of missing him. Most importantly, Catherine realized that their marriage had survived its greatest test. The 10 days of not knowing whether William was safe had shown her that their love was strong enough to endure whatever challenges their unique life might bring, and that knowledge gave her the strength to face the final weeks of separation with renewed hope. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 6 months and 3 days after William's departure. Catherine was reviewing her schedule for the week when her private secretary knocked on her office door with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Your Royal Highness," she said formally, though her voice was shaking with emotion, "I have word from the Foreign Office. His Royal Highness will be returning home this Friday." Catherine felt the world stop spinning for a moment. After months of uncertainty, the end had come so suddenly that she could barely process the information. Friday was only 3 days away. 3 days until she would see William's face in person, rather than through a pixelated video screen. 3 days until their family would be whole again. The palace erupted into controlled chaos as staff began preparations for William's return. Security protocols needed to be updated, schedules cleared, and media arrangements made. But Catherine was focused on something much more important, telling the children that their father was finally coming home. She found them in the nursery with their tutor, working on a geography lesson that, ironically, was focused on the region where William had been working. When she asked to speak with them privately, they immediately sensed that something significant was about to happen. "Papa is coming home," she said simply, watching as their faces transformed from curiosity to disbelief to pure joy. Charlotte was the first to react, jumping up from her chair and throwing her arms around Catherine. "Really? Really truly? Not just for a visit?" "Really truly," Catherine confirmed, laughing through sudden tears. "He'll be home Friday afternoon, and then he's staying with us." George asked practical questions about timing and travel arrangements, while Louis seemed to need the information repeated several times before he fully understood that the long wait was finally over. The tutor, who had witnessed many significant moments in the children's lives, quietly excused herself to give the family privacy for their celebration. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The children insisted on making welcome home banners and planning a special dinner with all of William's favorite foods. Catherine found herself changing clothes multiple times each day, unable to decide what she wanted to be wearing when she saw her husband again. The media attention reached a fever pitch as news of William's return spread. Photographers gathered outside the palace gates, and news anchors speculated about the reunion that would soon take place. The public's investment in their story had never been more apparent, with people camping out hoping to catch a glimpse of the homecoming. Catherine made one final public statement before William's return, thanking the people for their support throughout the deployment and expressing her excitement about their reunion. But she also requested privacy for their family during the first few days after his return, asking people to understand their need for time to reconnect away from public scrutiny. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself was celebrating William's homecoming. Catherine woke early, having slept better than she had in months, simply knowing that this was the day she had been counting down to for so long. The children were too excited to concentrate on anything, so Catherine declared it a holiday from lessons and normal routines. They spent the morning in the garden, watching the sky for any sign of the helicopter that would bring William home. At 2:30 p.m., the distinctive sound of rotors filled the air above Kensington Palace. Catherine and the children rushed to the private courtyard where William would land, their hearts pounding with anticipation that had been building for 6 months. As the helicopter touched down and the engines wound down, Catherine saw the door open and William step out. He looked thinner than when he had left, his face more weathered, but his smile was exactly the same as she remembered. Their eyes met across the courtyard, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The children reached him first, throwing themselves into his arms with shouts of joy and excitement. Catherine watched as he knelt down to embrace all 3 of them at once, his face buried in their hair as he whispered words she couldn't hear but could imagine. Then he stood and walked toward her, and Catherine felt as if her heart might burst from the overwhelming relief and joy of having him home. When he reached her, he didn't say anything at first. He simply pulled her into his arms and held her as if he would never let her go again. "I'm home," he whispered finally, and Catherine felt 6 months of worry and loneliness melt away in an instant. "Welcome home," she replied, and knew that whatever challenges they might face in the future, they would face them together. The nation had watched their farewell with tears and sympathy, but their reunion belonged entirely to them, a private moment of joy and completion that no camera could capture, and no words could adequately describe. After 6 months of separation, the Prince and Princess of Wales were finally home where they belonged together.